أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Okay, welcome you to the third lesson in this series. Essentially, what the aim of this course is to give you some of the building blocks that will help you to identify the language's features and its unique structures and the way it operates. So the principles that we're hoping to learn can be applied to both classical texts, in particular the Quran, which is the par excellence of all texts. We're hoping to apply these lessons in both classical texts as well as modern standard Arabic texts, because this grammar applies to both forms of the language. We're hoping that in the end result will be a better understanding of the Quran. And once this foundation is laid, further and deeper exploration of the nuances of the language can be done at your own pace, obviously registering or studying in more advanced courses. And we've used this logo to show you the building blocks that we're going to build on, the scaffolding that we're hoping to use. All right, so essentially we're going to cover four elements. The one is sounds and the writing system, which is to do with the phonetics. In other words, all the alphabets and how the sounds are made up. Then we're looking at the grammar component. And then the next step would be the forming of words, and then structures and word order, and then obviously how the entire language works. So how we're going to cover that is in the following. From those four building blocks, the first one is about sounds and writing. So we've covered consonants, the vowel signs, the harakat, and essentially Arabic is a right to left sequence of writing. So that's the first building block which we covered in lesson 1. Then we covered in lesson 2 the grammar, the parts and figures of speech. And I've done it in 3 different colors here to show you, first of all, the nouns, adjectives and pronouns that work like in tandem with each other. Then we look at verbs and adverbs, because verbs are the doing words and adverbs are those that qualify verbs, telling you how that action is being done, whether it's slowly, fast, or whatever. And then the third category is the prepositions, conjunctions, interjections, and exclamations. Now, prepositions are words that are like in or on or under or with. Conjunctions are joining words, like in other words, we're going to say the book and the pen are in the bag. When you use a conjunction, it links 2 parts of the sentence. Interjections are like and wow and ahlan wa sahlan, like exclamations, as it were. And then question particles, we did kaifa, mata, hal, aina, where. So it's where, how much, etc. So those are the 3 sort of breakdown. Essentially, if you look at ism, fa'al, and harf, those are the 3 sort of essential components of the language. Then we looked at some balagha, or the rhetoric, or the flowery use of the language, which covers in figures of speech. We looked at simile, metaphor, personification, hyperbole, and pun. So these elements were covered in the first 2 lessons. Now, how this language is structured in terms of its word formation, we're going to look at one example. And normally it's done in terms of, we call it, the root means the essence of the word. And normally it's in 3 letters, right? Like in this example, it's ka, ka, ka. Right? And kataba means he wrote, which is the verb. And it's also the root of many words. There's somebody that's, need to just mute somebody there. All right, so there's 2 aspects to a root. There's one is called inflection, which means that the word can be morphed or changed or inflected to show different tenses or persons doing the action. Right? So if you look at the verb kataba, if you add things at the end, like for instance, this tu here means I. If you say ta here, katabta, it will become you, etc. So just by taking that root and adding 1 or 2 letters at the end, it could be a ta, it could be a na, it could be a tum, or a waw, alif, etc. And we'll cover all these in the verbs when we cover the verb forms in terms of the past tense. So that inflection at the end shows us the person, whether it's I, you, we, she, they, or he, etc. And then we have the present tense verb, which means he writes, where the inflection happens sometimes at the beginning as well as little at the end. So if you have a ya in front and say an alif noon at the end, then it means they too are writing. A ya alone with the dhamma at the end means he is writing. So even this we'll cover in another lesson much later, but I'm just showing you, broadly speaking, that sometimes we add something in the beginning and sometimes also at the end in order to give us the tense of present tense, right? So those are the inflections that are added to a verb, the root form of a verb, to give us past tense and present tense. Then another feature of a root is we can derive other words from that same root. Like for instance, kitab. If you notice this little alif here that's in the middle, that means book or a book. And you notice at the end it shows the dhamma thing, that the dhamma, two dhammas on the end showing a book. And if you put an al in front, it becomes the book, and then it reduces double dhamma to one single dhamma. Okay? So kitabun is one of the derivative forms of the root form kataba. Then we have katib. Instead of kitab, we have katib, where the alif comes between the first and the second letter. This one shows us the writer, in other words, the person that's scribing or doing the writing is known as a katib. Then if you have a meme in front, like maktab, this means an office or a desk, two possible meanings where writing is normally done. A maktaba with a female form at the end, the ta marbuta coming at the end, means a library or a bookstore. Also has to do something with the element of the verb write or the root to write. And then maktub is something that is written, which is like a letter, right? So maktub could be another derivative of the verb of the root kataba. So if you look at these derivatives, you sometimes have the actual three-letter verbs, the kataba, and sometimes an alif inside at different positions, or you can have the meme in front, like in these three here, which shows us a place or the thing that is being, to deal with the verb kataba itself. So let's look at another example. Say the root darasa is another three-letter word, right? And darasa has to do with either studying or something related to education or schooling, right? The inflections from that particular root, we have darastu means I studied, past tense, at the end, and darasta, meaning the you, also past tense, right? So these are examples of past tense. And the present tense is where you do things in the beginning of the letter, like the alif to show I, or the ta to show you or she, as well as sometimes you have other letters that come in there to show the plural forms of these particular verbs in the present tense. Then in terms of derivation, here we have darsun, which means a lesson. Madrasa, the place where we study or school. Mudarris is a teacher or an instructor. And here you can even have the feminine version, which is mudarrisatun. And if you add a ta at the end, making it a female teacher. Okay. And then you have tadris, which means tutoring or instruction. And then the word dars, you can even add an al on it, or even you can add al on all of these words. You can have the school, you can have the teacher, etc. We've covered the third pillar in one sense, although we're going to go in more detail, but in particular on this particular one, right? Then we go on to the fourth pillar, which is word order, structure, and agreement. And this we get through, we get vocabulary, more words as we go along, more phrases that we can develop, and more sentences that we can construct. So the concept of case, which is the three, nominative, accusative, and genitive, which is to do with how the noun is shown at the end in its case ending, meaning either un for nominative or an or double fatha or single fatha for accusative, and in or e with the kasra to show genitive case. So we've covered case. Today we're going to look at the number concept. And then hopefully we'll cover some of it today and some in the next lesson. And then the other concepts we'll have to cover is gender, definite or indefinite, the idafa construction and verbs, etc. So those will come in later lessons. All right, so we'll start off with number. Now, if we look at English and how it operates, English has just got two numbers. It's either got a singular word or the plural form. For instance, you have one book, and the plural is just many books, right? And many could refer to either two or even more than two books. Likewise, one man is many men, or one woman is many women, right? So you can see the spelling changing to give you the plural form. Then we have other examples of plurals like a mouse, plural is mice, and a house is houses, right? Now here you can see it's not heis, like if you had to say the pattern to be this, you'd expect this to be the plural of houses, but it's not heis, it's houses actually. So even in English, there are unique sort of features of plural forms. That's what I'm trying to show in this example. Also, one ox gives you oxen. Right? So it's also different from all the above. Knife gives you knives, and foot gives you feet. Now, these are just a few. There's many, many more like groups of words that take each of these different types of plural. Right, so no general rule applies to all English nouns. In each group of these, and each of these groups, and I've given you 6 examples here, is kind of unique, but there are more words in that particular group, and there are even more groups that I've listed here. So some have similar patterns, like books, the plural, pens is a plural, desk is a plural, where you just add an S, or you have wives and knives to be, a pattern there as well. So there are patterns as well in terms of expressing plural in English. Let's move on to number in Arabic now. In Arabic, the unique thing is we have a specific dual form for two things or two persons or two objects, right? And the plural itself starts from 3 and above, or 3 and bigger, or 3 and more than 3, right? So the unique benefit is to eliminate any ambiguity when it comes to 2 and then 3 and more, right? So it helps in understanding the precise calculation, for example, of inheritance in the Quran. So the dual form is used very, very precisely in certain contexts. Right, so in terms of how these words are formed in the dual or plural form, these are the 3 concepts we need to understand. That sometimes a word, and I've represented a word with these 5 X's, right? So any word, like book, pen, whatever you want to say, if we put a prefix, meaning a letter or letters that come before, right, that precede. So in other words, if it comes before the word, we call this a prefix, right? The infix are letters that are inserted into a word. So in other words, here's the full word is here. Can you see some parts are there and some parts are there? And inside it, we add a letter or two. That is known as an infix, right? So it comes inside a word. And then we have a suffix, which is at the end of a word, right? So there's the word. And at the end of the word, if you add a letter or letters, that's known as a suffix. So you need to understand these words, prefix, infix, and suffix when we use it so that you can understand this concept well. All right, so singular is normally the base form of the word, like kitabun. And then dual is used for exactly 2 items of the same, like 2 books or 2 pens or 2 girls or 2 schools, right? And this is indicated with suffixes. And the plural could be either sound meaning they have regular endings, in other words, common endings, or broken, which means they are irregular kind of endings, where one is like kitab can become kutub, dars can become durus, mal'ab playground can become mala'ib. So they are different. So those are examples of broken or irregular changes where each word takes on a different form, just like how in English we had knife takes on knives and, mouse became mice. So understanding this concept of sound and broken is also important for the plurals. But let's look at the dual first. Right. So the mufrad or the singular refers to one item or one person. So kitabun is a book, madrasa is a school, bintun is a girl. Right. So those base forms are the singular form. Right. Then, in order to make it dual, we add suffixes. Now, how do we do it? We take that root form of the the base form, which is kitabun, right? And in its nominative case, in other words, when that word is like the subject of the sentence, then in order to make it dual, we change the ba, which had the dhammatain here, to add an ani. So the ba takes a fatha, right? And then this ani is the attached part, which is the suffix that's added to the word kitab in order to make it two books in the nominative case. Right? Then if you look at the kitabun form, which is the accusative form, where it's the object of the sentence, what happens here is we add a suffix called aini, the ya and the noon, where you notice the kitab again takes the fatha there, it loses the double fatha, and it becomes a single fatha, and then you add an aini, so kitabaini becomes the accusative form in dual of that particular noun. Then kitabin, which is a kasratain here, becomes it stays the same. So the accusative and genitive has got the same case ending kitabeni, and it's noticeable in the sentence if it appears after a preposition or if it's in a idafa construction, which is a second uh, reason why a noun can be genitive in case. And we'll do idafa as a separate lesson maybe in about 2 weeks' time. So for now, you can see that the ani and the aini are the two suffix endings representing dual in Arabic. Okay, so to give you other examples of it, you have a singular madrasatun, then this tun can become, the tun can becomes ani, so the ta that was a ta marbuta here, this closed ta, the ta that looks like that, becomes the open ta, which is this ta here now, right? So this ta converts to that ta, and then you add an ani at the end. So madrasatani, you see? So that's two schools in the nominative case. And then we said accusative and genitive have got the same. So the fatha or fathatain and the kasra or kasratain becomes the same thing, madrasatini, right? So that's an example of a word that ends in a ta marbuta and how that ta changes its shape in order for you to add the ani or any as part of that word. Okay, let's look at another example of a girl. Here we have a word that ends in a ta, right? The ta is part of the word bint, right? So it's a girl. Now what happens there is we simply add the ani here. So the bint becomes bintani or bintani. Okay, in the two cases, the nominative here and accusative genitive. And you remember I gave you this little mnemonic. These are the examples of the nominative, accusative, and genitive just to remind you what they are, right? Then we have waladun as another example. Here it's straightforward. We add the ani, so it's waladani and waladaini to give you the two case endings, the three case endings for the word boy. All right, so if you take any noun like that, and if you want to see if it's dual, and here's some examples from the Quran. Here you have the word rajulani. So rajulun is a man. Can you see the word, the root here? Rajulun. And then the ani, we'll just learned is the nominative form. In other words, the subject or the doer of the sentence. So two men of those who feared. So you can see this is the subject, two men. Therefore, this has to be ani and not any. Right? And then if you look at this example here now, وَضْرِبْ لَهُمْ مَثْلًا رَجُلَيْنِ. So, and present to them an example of two men. Now, can you see this of two men? Right? It's almost like an idafa construction where the second noun becomes, like genitive in case because of the idafa construction. And like I told you, don't worry about the idafa for now, but I'm just saying you this is another example of a genitive form, and we'll understand it better when we've done the idafa construction. And then here's another example. Jannatun is one garden, and Jannataini is two gardens. Okay, we look at other examples of jewel. Qalu sihrani tazaharu, two works of magic here. So here the ani again coming in. And fihima ainani, again here the ani coming in as two springs. Right? And Surah Rahman has got many examples of the dual form because it rhymes with tajriyan and ala tukazibani, ani. You'll see ani throughout that particular surah. So if you want to look at further examples of dual, you can go to Surah Rahman and see it. Okay, then we move on to the plural form. Now, they are essentially sound plurals. There's the sound masculine and the sound feminine plural. Jamu Muzakkar Salim and Jamu Annath Salim. Now, how we form these plurals in Arabic is in the masculine, we form it by adding a una, right? In the nominative case, and an ina in the, so kasra on the last letter and joined to the ina, to the yanun. So the una here, dhamma and followed by wawnun, or the kasra followed by yanun. Those are the masculine forms of the sound masculine plural. And a sound feminine plural is formed by adding atun. Right, so the atun or atin for accusative and genitive. Now, these two are very often used in Arabic, and you'll see plenteous examples of this throughout the Quran. So to give you one masculine example, say you take the word muallimun, means a male teacher or one male teacher. To change it to its plural, which is teachers, you add the una here or the ina here to give you the nominative case here and the accusative or genitive case in that example. Right, and likewise on the feminine side, the feminine indicator is the ta marbuta at the end, so that male teacher, if you want to make it feminine, you add a ta marbuta at the end and you get a female teacher. And if you want to make it plural, you add atun and atin. Right, again for nominative and accusative and genitive. Right, so these are examples of sound plurals because why they are called sound is the word muallimun will also work for other nouns like mudarrisun, right? She's also a teacher, and other nouns. They follow the same pattern. So mudarris will become mudarrisuna, mudarrisina. Mudarrisatun will become mudarrisatun, mudarrisatin. So this is an example of a sound plural because the pattern of una, ina, and atun, atin follows in all these words related to male human beings and female human beings in general. Right. So to give you examples in a sentence, like muallimuna is plural of teachers. The teachers arrived at the school. So arrived, here's the verb. So if there's a verb, this is the subject or the doer of the sentence. So therefore it's nominative case. Right? Therefore you use una. So the teachers arrived and then at the school. Now this ila makes this word genitive in case. Right? Can you see the kasra here? So this is an example of a full sentence where we have a verb, a subject, and an object. Right? There's a normal word order of a normal verbal sentence. So this is the subject. The teachers are doing this action, which is arriving or arrived, and where they arrived is at the school. Right, now here's another example of how accusative genitive is used, where you have I saw. So the A to the I comes from the two there. I saw. And then because this is the doer of the sentence, the person doing this action, and who did he see? The teachers. So this is the object, and therefore it is ina. Can you see the ina here on the muallimina? So I saw teachers in the library or in the bookshop. Okay, so there's an example of uh, the accusative case here in this example here. And then another example is if it's in a sentence, for instance, ma'a with, muallimina with the teachers in the classroom, right? So here, because of the preposition, this makes it genitive. Here you had a preposition, this made that also genitive. Can you see that kasra there in the singular? But here, because it's a plural form, you're using the genitive showing by ina, the ina coming in to show you that after a preposition, this word has to be genitive in case. All right, there's sound feminine plural, the female human beings in general. So here you have talibat, and there's the verb zahaba. This noon is the feminine plural of talibat, means female students went, and then to the school. So here you have an example of a noun starting this verbal sentence where female students went. So there's agreement here between went and the group of atun, which is nominative of the word students. Now, if you look at the second example, I watched shahadtu. Shahada is the verb to watch. Tu is I, right? So here's the nominative, the person doing it, and then female students is the accusative. So therefore, here you have accusative. So here you have also accusative atun, atin coming in, right? So atin is the accusative form of that particular plural, and then in the stadium or in the playground. Then we have another example, the books of female students. Now here, this is an idafa construction here, which we haven't covered, but I'm just going to show it to you now, where the first noun doesn't take an L, can you see, but it is definite by virtue of one vowel sign. So this is the feature of an idafa construction, where the word the is indicated but not shown, right? And then talibat is the plural form, and atin is the genitive form of it. So this idafa construction, the feature of it is the second noun is normally always genitive in case, and therefore this is an example of an idafa construction, and the reason for it being genitive is it is the second noun of an idafa construction, and the idafa construction is shown by the word of. Right, so this is the second use of the of a genitive. The first one we said is after a preposition, so fi, ila, ma, and then the following word will also be genitive in case. Okay, then we move on to examples of from the Quran of sound plurals. Here's a verse. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. It says, At-ta'ibuna al-abiduna al-hamiduna as-sa'ihuna al-raki'una as-sajiduna al-amiruna bil-ma'ruf wal-nahuna anil-munkar wal-hafiduna li-hududillahi wa bashiril mu'minin. Right, so here's plenty of examples of the una, the nominative case. Ta'ibuna means the faithful or those that make lots of tawbah are called ta'ibuna. Then abid is from the root abada is to worship, right? So there you get from that the derivative of abada, you get abid is the one who worships or one who is devout, and this una here again to show the plural form of abid. Hamid is from the root hamada is to praise. So you get Hamid is the person that praises a lot, right? And then you have the una there, in others, the males, plural of males that are celebrators of Allah's praise. As-sa'ihuna, meaning, those that are wayfarers or on the path, as it were. So saha, as-sa'ih is the root form there. And there we have the una again. Araki una means those who make ruku or prostrate, right? So there's the rakiuna. No, rakiuna is the bowing, and sajiduna is the prostrating from sajda. And amiruna bil maruf, amara is to command, right? And maruf is to do what is right, or goodness. So the ones that are bidding what is right, or ordering or encouraging what is right. When nahuna anil munkar, nahi is to make and to forbid something. Nahuna, so nahi is the root, and that una is showing the plural, that those are the ones that forbid what is wrong. Well, hafiduna, hafada is to protect something or keep to the bounds of something. And so the protectors of the hudud, the boundaries of Allah. Here's another example of an idafa construction. But hafiduna is the what we're showing you here, the una form. And then wabashiril mu'minina, and give glad tidings to the believers. Now here you see the the giving of glad tidings is the action being done on believers. So therefore, mu'minina, can you see the una and the ina coming in at the end of this particular plural form? So these are all examples of sound plurals. Imagine in one ayah of the Quran, there's so many. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then 10. So there are like 10 examples of the masculine plural being used in one ayah of the Quran. Then we look at another example, which is even more amazing, because this one refers to both the males and the females. So, inna is a particle that introduces something in the accusative case, right? We haven't covered that, but you'll see this rule applying right to the surah, right to the ayah, sorry. So here we have the Muslimuna, Muslimina, so the male Muslims and the female Muslims, right? Then Iman, Mu'min is a believer, so the believers, men, and the believing women. Qanit, qanata is to do with obedience, right? That's the root. So you have qanitina wal qanitat, right? The obedient men and the obedient women. Sadiq is to do with sidq, is honesty or truthfulness. So the Sadiq is the male people that are truthful, and Sadiqat are the females that are truthful. Sabr, we know, is the word to be patient. So sabirina and sabirat is the male people that are patient and the females that are patient. Khushu is to do with uh, humble or humility. You know, somebody that has no pride. Right? So those that are humble of the men and humble of the women. Mutasaddiq is from sadaqah. You can see sadaqah there. Uh, that's the root form, this derivative. Mutasaddiq is the one who is charitable from the men, charitable from the women. Then Soma Yasumu is to do with fasting, right? And so you have Sa'imuna, Sa'imina. So Sa'imina is accusative there, and Sa'imat is accusative of the female. Hafidhina Furujahum, this phrase here, will Hafidhat. So Hafid is to protect, right? And the Furuj are to do with the private parts. So the male who protect their private parts, as well as the females that do the same thing. And the men who Zakar from Zikr is to remember Allah. So Zakirin Allah, here's one masculine plural that remembers Allah much, and with Zakirat, right? So they remember Allah greatly or very often and frequently. And for them, what Allah has done. So there's all these categories of, for both men and women applying right through all these things. Yeah, all these qualities that men and women have. What's being prepared for them? A'addallahu lahum maghfirah, forgiveness, and a great reward. And inshallah, Jannah will come with it. So here's an example of the masculine plural and the feminine plural, the sound forms of it, meaning referring to male human beings and female human beings, replete in this particular example. And once more, a profound, very good example of the usage of the sound plurals in Arabic. Okay, so I think we'll end at that point for today. So just to revise what we've covered today, we've done number, but we've just done the dual as well as the sound masculine plural, the sound feminine plural. Right? What's left in number is the broken plurals, and there are quite a number of types of broken plurals, like in English, which we'll cover as with examples in our next lesson, inshallah. All right, so we'll stop at that point. So just to show you the broad picture of where we are busy with this concept called number, and we still have one more lesson on it just to complete the full picture of the duals and the plurals. Okay, with that, we end with Wal-Asr. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Wal-Asr, inna al-insana lafi khusr, illa alladhina amanu wa amilu salihat, wa tawasaw bil haqq, wa tawasaw bis sabr.